kind of learned a lot about Village View, so I'm happy to share some of that with you, and then you can see what it means to all of you. Do you need to film me, or what do you? Whatever. But this is the first example of government-subsidized public housing, and that's where they're called first houses. So this is the very first public housing in the city of New York, and as you see, program for slum clearance. The notion was that these neighborhoods were neighborhoods, well, they started out as wealthy, they were they were Indian lands, Native American lands, then they were farms, then they became housing. Maybe this was never a rich area, but more middle class. And then came the waves of immigrants, and this is where whole East Village, Lower East Side was where all the tenements went up. And those were considered the worst, most infested, most horrible areas of the city. Probably if you ask people who lived here, they might not have said that, but that was the notion at the time. Because there was so much slum clearance over the decades, and so many people were displaced. And among the files that I will dig up and get to, but I mentioned in LaGuardia College, the archives of the Housing Authority are there, and they literally would send out teams of social workers or so on to go into the neighborhoods, apartment by apartment, house by house, report on the conditions. Oh, Mr. So-and-so, a 90-year-old man living in a room with no light and no bathroom, like trying to document how terrible the conditions were before all their houses got knocked down. But I never could fully understand, did these people then get to move in? I think it depends. I think in some cases they did. I think in some cases if they were African American, they didn't, and they had to fend for themselves. I think a lot of these kind of things happen. In New York State, and as far as I know, this is the only place that it happened, the state government enacted a program called the Michell Lama program, which sought to repeat the public housing experiment, but to bring it up one economic notch, and that the government should actually also get involved with providing middle-income housing. And by the way, looking back upon it, in a way, only fairly so, in that the federal government was already, after World War II, the federal government made it hugely advantageous for people to buy a house in the suburbs. These buildings were actually meant to be public housing. These were designed to be the Franklin Delano Roosevelt houses. You can still see it on the blueprints. So they were going to be low-income public housing. They were going to build it, but they were going to put it into the Michell Lama program and make it be middle-income housing. And as I think I told you, there were this is maybe more myth, but the two concessions or changes that were made were that the apartments were not originally designed to have balconies, but balconies were added because middle-income people should have a balcony, whereas poor people don't really deserve one. And also that apparently in public housing, closets were made without doors. The fear was people would break the doors. I don't even know what, or there was too much money to spend on a poor person. But we got doors on our closets instead. One of the things that urban planners of that era just loved to do was to get rid of streets. So here you see 5th Street, goodbye 5th Street. Do not ask me why they thought this was such a great thing. They just loved it, making what they call super blocks, where you took 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks, combined them. The biggest example of that ever was where the World Trade Center was. That was a giant super block. This is a small super block of the elimination of 5th Street, and eliminated in a way that when I later studied this for my class and I was looking at the site plan, it made me just seethe with anger that it's like they eliminated it forever, because the way these buildings are placed, even if some more enlightened planner of the future decided to put 5th Street back through, it would have to be a very narrow street, because these actually sit in the actual roadbed of 5th Street. You know, they could have There's no reason why this building couldn't have been put a little bit more that way, but it's like they just wanted to kill that street. We're just recovering now from many, many years of disinvestment. This fencing actually at one point was falling apart and rotted away, and there's some areas where you can still see that. Why? Because this being middle-income housing, we were expected to fend for ourselves. Well, people don't necessarily want to raise their rent just to have a nicer fence. Complaints they received that turtle had been the scene of a blowjob. Some teenagers had been giving each other blowjobs on the turtle. Like we were reading this letter to the board. She was sitting on the turtle. I don't forget the whole story. When the program was first put in place, people didn't necessarily, there was not as much demand to live in New York, so they were happy to be able to get government subsidy to appeal to middle-income people. By the time the 50 years passed, they didn't need the subsidy anymore because people with a lot more money were demanding those very same apartments, and that's what happened. But the other branch, and that's why I'm still here today to talk to you about it, is that the other branch of the program was a co-op program where non-traditional developers, non-profit developers, institutions such as churches, and there was a flurry of this activity where various non-profit sponsors would come together to put forward and develop a co-op project. And there the laws were slightly different. So they're co-ops in the sense that all co-ops are, when you buy into it, you buy shares of the corporation. The difference being that you have to be under a certain income level in order to be able to qualify to buy those shares. And that once you've bought those shares, you cannot just sell them on the open market. So yes, I do own shares in the 2-bedroom apartment in East Village. It's a non-profit co-op and it's very affordable. Great. And I'm very lucky to have that, but I could never sell it. I can only sell it back to the building. So I don't own it as property, I only own it as a right, I suppose, which is another way to look at it. And as well, people who put their name on the waiting list. There is a waiting list. It's in that building. You can actually see it hanging on the wall. There's several waiting lists, and they move. I mean, they move very slowly, but there had been a waiting list from the 1980s that finally got exhausted, I think in 2008 or 9. If you come into Michell Lama and you meet the income qualifications, but then let's say your income goes up, at one point there was even, technically speaking, you were supposed to leave, but that is impossible to do in New York. At the very least, had to pay your fair share of property taxes. So because we earn above, and it's not that hard to earn above, we pay our fair share, but it still tells you in the end how much profit can be made by housing, because even with us paying our fair share, what we pay is still nothing, $1,000 plus or minus dollars a month, which tells you that that's what it costs to operate housing in New York City, even paying the full property tax. So where's all the rest of the rent going? The little dogs are the worst. Since the program is so heavily monitored and overseen by various government entities, and because there is so much pressure on affordable housing in New York City for the past 20 years, these government entities have made it next to impossible for anyone to actually convert or privatize, as they say. Right now, the biggest sort of murmur going around, though, and it might actually, I'd forgotten to tell you this. There are a couple of board members who are very interested in pursuing the privatization idea, and so they know what a tinderbox that is and how it gets people upset, but they have taken it upon themselves to have this informal research and investigation and these informal meetings and that anyone can come to just talk about it and gain knowledge. But of course, once you start putting out a flyer that says informal meeting on privatization, then you have a lot of people say, "Wow, what's happening?" So there is a little bit of tension, and it could be that at an annual meeting that might come out. There are plenty of nonprofit developers, and there are plenty of people who would build pure, affordable housing if only they were given the programs to do so. But that's no longer in the mindset. Now it's only about enabling big developers. What I think is the biggest shame is that this program or some version of it isn't brought back. I think it's very successful. I mean, we've had our share of problems. The urban design context I don't like at all, but the actual housing is great. You know, it's and what I feel is missing from the debate today is what I hear when I pay attention. Affordable housing is always talked about as an adjunct of market rate housing. Oh, give the developer an incentive and they will provide 20% affordable. Well, one of the problems with that means the other 80% is not affordable. And it means you're building more and more and more high-end housing in New York City. Whereas the approach, I think, should be just build affordable housing. Forget about the 80%. Build more developments like these. Find more creative ways. Are there really 20% affordable housing in there? How do you know? Do they have different colored doors? I mean, or windows? Who's counting? How do you really know? Whereas if it's a middle income building, it's harder to kind of disguise that.